Hi guys, number 10. For a long time after that meeting, we did not discuss going home. Life on Spider Monkey Island went along. The winter came and went. Summer was with us before we knew it. As time passed, the doctor became even busier. The hours he could spare for his natural history work grew fewer, and when something reminded him of England or his old life, his face grew thoughtful and a little sad, but he never spoke of it. I believe he would have spent the rest of his days on the island if it hadn't been for an accident and for Polynesia. One morning, Polynesia and I were watching the doctor oversee the building of a new theater in Popsipetel. There were already an opera house and a concert hall. Polynesia got so annoyed at the sight, I suggested we take a walk. Do you really think, I asked as we sat on the sand, that he will never go back to Puddleby again? I don't know, she groaned. I've been racking my brains to think of a plan. If we could only hit upon something that would turn his thoughts back to natural history again, something big enough to get him excited, we might manage it. But how? I lay on the warm beach thinking of my mother and father. Polynesia kept muttering beside me, listening to the lapping waves. I fell asleep and had a dream. In it, the island moved again. It moved suddenly, as though something powerful had heaved it up and dropped it down. I was awakened by Polynesia's gentle pecking on my nose. Tommy, what a boy. You slept through an earthquake and never noticed it? What's the matter? I said, yawning as I sat up. Shh, look. Here's our chance now, whispered Polynesia, pointing out to sea. Not more than 30 yards from shore, I saw an enormous pale pink shell. Dome-shaped, it towered up in a graceful rainbow curve to a tremendous height. What in the world is it? I asked. That, she whispered, is what sailors call the sea serpent. I've seen it from the decks of ships, from far away, but now that I see it up close, I think that the sea serpent is none other than the great glass sea snail the Fidget told us about. Tommy, we're in luck. We must get the doctor down here to see it before it moves off to the deep hole. If we can, we may leave this blessed island yet. Stay here and keep an eye on it. I'll get the doctor. Don't move or speak. It might get scared. Snails are awful timid things. Creeping up the sands, Polynesia hid behind some bushes before flying towards town. I waited alone on the shore and watched this unbelievable monster in fascination. It moved very little. It seemed to be hurt. Polynesia returned with the doctor. They were so silent I didn't know that they were there until they crouched beside me in the sand. One sight of the snail changed the doctor completely. His eyes sparkled with delight. I hadn't seen him so thrilled since he caught the Jabizri beetle when we first landed on the island. The great glass sea snail himself, he whispered. Polynesia, see if you can find any porpoises. Perhaps they'll know why the snail is here. It's unusual for him to be in such shallow water. Stubbins, you go to the harbor and get a canoe. Be careful to paddle quietly so you don't frighten him. And don't tell any of the Indians, Polynesia added in a whisper as I moved to go. We must keep this a secret or we'll have a crowd of sightseers here in 5 minutes. I reached the harbor and took a small light canoe. Polynesia returned ahead of me with a pair of porpoises. These were already conversing in low tones with John Dolittle. What I want to know, the doctor was saying, is how the snail comes here. I thought he always stayed in the deep hole or else surfaced in mid-ocean. Oh, haven't you heard? The porpoises replied. You covered up the deep hole when you sank the island. The fishes that were in it at the time have been trying to get out ever since. The great snail had the worst luck of all. He was nipped in the tail just as he was leaving the hole. It took him 6 months to wriggle free. He finally heaved the whole island up at one end to get his tail loose. Didn't you feel a sort of earthquake about an hour ago? I did, the doctor said. It shook down part of the theater I'm building. Well, that was the snail. All the other fishes escaped when he raised the lid, but the strain of the heave sprained a muscle in his tail. Dear me, said the doctor, I'm terribly sorry. It was an accident that the island was let down. Is the poor fellow hurt very badly? We're not sure because none of us can speak the language. He doesn't seem seriously injured. Can't any of your people speak shellfish? The doctor asked. Not a word. It's a difficult language. Could you find some fish who could? We could try, said the porpoises. I'd be extremely grateful, said the doctor. There are so many important questions I want to ask this snail. Wait here, the porpoises said. We'll see what we can do. So Dr. Dolittle waited upon the shore, and the porpoises shuttled back and forth for an hour, bringing different sea creatures to see if they could help. But it seemed that very few spoke shellfish. The porpoises were hopeful when they found a sea urchin who said he understood starfish, but not pure shellfish. The urchin stayed with us while the porpoises went looking for a starfish. They were back quickly, and using the sea urchin as an interpreter, questioned the starfish. We found he could speak shellfish fairly well. Encouraged, the doctor and I got into the canoe. The porpoises, urchin, and starfish swam alongside. Paddling very gently, we stopped under the towering shell of the great snail. Then began the strangest conversation. First, the starfish asked the snail something. The snail gave the answer to the urchin, who told the porpoises, who told the doctor. The doctor was very excited about getting so close to learning the language he had so longed to know. Soon, by having the other fish repeat short phrases the snail used, he began to put words together himself. The doctor was already familiar with several other fish languages, which helped a great deal. He practiced for a while and then put his face below the water and tried speaking directly to the snail. It was very difficult, and it took hours to get any results. But I could tell by the happy look on the doctor's face that he was making progress. The sun was low in the west when the doctor turned to me. Stubbins, he said, I have persuaded the snail to come onto dry land and let me examine his tail. Go to the palace and get my medicine bag. It's under the throne in the audience chamber. When I returned, the snail was on the beach. Seeing his size, it was easy to understand why sailors called him the sea serpent. John Dolittle examined the swelling on his tail. Dr. Dolittle took a large bottle from the bag I brought and began rubbing the sprain with its contents, and then he took all the bandages he had and fastened them end to end. Even then they were not long enough to get more than halfway around the snail's huge tail. Insisting that the swelling must be strapped tight, he sent me back to the palace to get every sheet from the royal linen closet. Polynesia and I tied these into bandages for him, and at last he was satisfied that the sprain was well strapped. The snail was delighted by all the attention. He stretched himself on the beach in comfort, and when the shell on his back was empty, we could look right through it. One of us had better sit up with him tonight, the doctor said. I'll ask Bumpo. He's been napping in the summer house all day. If I wasn't so busy, I would stay. I still have so many things to talk over with him, he sighed. You know, Doctor, Polynesia said as we prepared to go back to town, you ought to take a holiday. All kings take holidays once in a while. I suppose that's true, said the doctor. I tell you what to do, she said, trying not to sound as excited as she felt. When you get back to the palace, publish a proclamation that you are going away for a week into the country for your health, without any servants, just like a plain person. They all do it. It's called traveling incognito. Then the week you're away, you can rest on the beach and talk to the snail. It sounds most attractive, the doctor agreed, but there is so much work to be done with the theater, and the native mothers need my help. Oh, bother the theater and the babies too, snapped Polynesia. Take a holiday. You need it, and I do too. The doctor and I walked silently back to the palace, and I could see that Polynesia's words had made an impression on him. After supper, he disappeared from the palace without saying a word. We all knew he had gone back to the beach to be with the snail. He never even mentioned it to Bumpo. As soon as the doors were closed, Polynesia said, this is our last chance. We've got to get the doctor to take this holiday, or we'll be on this island for the rest of our blessed lives. What difference will the holiday make? Bumpo asked. Don't you see? Polynesia said to him impatiently. If he has a whole week to get into his natural history stuff again, he might agree to leave this island. But while he is a king, he never gets a moment to think about anything but government. That's true, Bumpo agreed. Besides, Polynesia added, the only way he could ever escape here is secretly. He's got to leave while on holiday. The Indians would never let him go. If we get him to agree to the holiday, we must get the sea snail to promise to take us in his shell to the mouth of Puddleby River. The temptation will be too great for the doctor to pass up. I know he'll come because he can take this chance to see the bottom of the ocean floor and bring Long Arrow's medicines back to England with him. How thrilling, I cried. Do you mean the snail could take us all the way back to Puddleby under the sea? Of course, Polynesia said. He could crawl along the ocean floor and the doctor could see all the sights. I hope the doctor agrees, Jip said. I'm sick of the tropics. There are no rats here to chase or anything, and wouldn't Dab Dab be glad to have us back? By the end of the next month, it will be 2 whole years since we left England, I said, since we pulled up anchor at King's Bridge and bumped our way out into the river. Do you remember all the people waving from the river wall? Yes, and I suppose they've often wondered whether we're dead or alive, Jip added. Cease, Bumpo said. I feel I am about to weep from sentiment. After his all-night talk with the snail, the doctor made up his mind to take a holiday. A proclamation was published right away that His Majesty was going to the country for a 7-day rest. During his absence, the palace and government offices would be open as usual. Polynesia was thrilled. She set to work quietly planning every part of the departure. She made sure no one knew where we were going or what we were taking. Polynesia told me I must take all the doctor's notebooks. Long Arrow, the only Indian let in on the secret, said he would like to come as far as the beach to see the great snail. Polynesia told him to bring his plants so the doctor could bring them to England. Bumpo was ordered to carry the high hat carefully hidden under his coat. We were to leave at midnight when most townspeople would be asleep, and when the clock struck 12, we stepped silently into the moonlit garden. No one had seen us leave. Something made me pause, and I looked back before we reached the beach. I knew we were leaving never to return, and I wonder what other kings and ministers would live and rule in the palace when we were gone. I hoped they would be kind as King Jong. At the beach, we found the snail feeling much better. He could move his tail with no pain. The porpoises were still hanging about to see what was happening, and while the doctor was checking the snail's tail, Polynesia pulled them aside for a private chat. My friend, she said, you know how much John Dolittle has done for the animals. Here is your chance to do something for him. He is made king of the island against his will. Now he feels he cannot leave, which is nonsense. Here's your job. I need you to tell the sea urchin, to tell the starfish, to tell the snail, to take us in his shell to Puddleby River. Is that plain? Quite, said the porpoises. We will do our best to persuade him. It is a shame for the great man to waste his time here when he is so needed by the animals. But don't let the doctor know what you're up to, she warned. Get the snail to offer on his own account to take us. Half an hour passed. It seemed like a very long time. And suddenly the doctor left the snail and splashed out to us breathlessly. What do you think? He cried excitedly. The snail has offered on his very own to take us all back to England inside his shell. He says he has to take a voyage of discovery to find a new home since the deep hole is closed. It wouldn't be out of his way to get to the mouth of Puddleby River. Before that, I'm going to show you a picture of the porpoises. Goodness, what a chance. No man has ever examined the ocean floor all the way from Brazil to Europe. Oh, that I had never allowed myself to be made king. Now the chance of my lifetime will slip by. No one said a word. Dr. Dolittle turned and moved to the middle of the beach, gazing longingly at the snail. Polynesia rose and quietly moved to his side. Doctor, she said in a soft voice as though speaking to a child, this king business is not your real work in life. The natives will manage, not as well as with you, but they will learn. You have done your duty by them and taught them well. Accept the snail's offer. The work you'll do, the information you'll carry home, will be of more lasting value than what is here. The people will continue your work, I am sure. Good friend, the doctor said sadly, I cannot. I fear they will go back to their old ways. Something else will turn up. That is where you are wrong, doctor, she said. Now is when you should go. Nothing will turn up. The longer you stay, the harder it will be to leave. Go tonight. The doctor stood thinking silently. There are my notebooks, he said. I have all of them here, doctor, I said, speaking up, and Long Arrow's collection. It is here, O kindly one, came the Indian's deep voice from a shadow beneath the palm. Provisions? Asked the doctor. Food for the journey? We have a week's supply for the holiday, said Polynesia. That's more than we need. The doctor stood silent and thoughtful. My hat, he said fretfully. How could I appear in Puddleby with the crown on my head? Here it is, doctor, Bumpo said, pulling the old hat from beneath his coat. But we could tell the doctor was still trying to think up more excuses. "O kindly one," said Long Arrow, "why tempt ill fortune? Your way is clear. Your fortune and your work beckon you back to your home, and you will share that, what I have gathered for mankind in lands where it will be wider use than here. Day is at hand. Go now, for truly I believe that unless you do, you will remain the captive king of the Popsipetels." Great decisions are made in a short time. The doctor suddenly lifted the sacred crown from his head and laid it on the sands. "They will find it here," he murmured, his voice choked with tears, "and they will know I have gone. Will they ever understand or forgive me?" He took his old hat from Bumpo. Facing Long Arrow, he gripped the Indian's outstretched hand in silence. "You do right, O kindly one," Long Arrow said. "Farewell. May good fortune ever lead you by the hand." It was the only time I ever saw the doctor weep. Without a word, he turned and headed into the shallow water of the sea. The snail made an opening between his shoulders and the edge of his shell, and the doctor climbed up and in. We followed him with our baggage. The opening shut tight with a whistling noise. The great creature turned east and slowly moved forward, sloping into deeper waters, and as the swirling dark green waters closed about our heads, the sun popped up over the ocean, and through the snail's transparent shell we saw the world beneath the sea light up with daybreak. The story of our homeward voyage is brief compared to our 2-year adventure, but extraordinarily exciting. Inside the spacious shell, the snail's wide back was quite comfortable. He just asked us to remove our boots to become the hobnails hurt, because the hobnails hurt his back as we ran from side to side looking at the sights. I had always thought that the bottom of the sea was flat. I found it was as bumpy as dry land. There were mountain ranges, dense forests of tall sea plants, and empty stretches of sandy mud like deserts. In the lower levels, we often passed the shadowy shapes of dead ships, and in the deeper, darker water, monstrous fish would spring up suddenly and then flash away with the speed of an arrow. Bolder ones came up and peered at us through the shell. It was a thrilling and ever-changing show. The doctor wrote and sketched without stopping, filling every blank notebook we had left. It was hard to get light to see for writing. It was very dim in the lower waters, and on the third day a band of fire eels passed. The doctor asked them to swim alongside us for light. During the darkness of night, the snail swam rather than crawled, making terrific speed just by waggling his long tail. We completed the entire journey in 5.5 days. Early in the afternoon of the 6th day, we felt we were climbing a gentle slope and noticed that it was growing lighter. We saw that the snail had crawled out of the water and had stopped on a long strip of sand. Behind us, the surface of the sea rippled. On our left was the mouth of a river. In front, low, flat land stretched into the mist. It was a great change from the hot sunshine of Popsipetel. With the same whistling sound, the snail made an opening for us to crawl out. We stepped upon the marshy land and noticed a fine autumn rain drizzling. "Can this be Merry England?" Bumpo asked. "Doesn't look like any place in particular with the mist." "Yes," said Polynesia, shaking the rain off her feathers. "This is England. You can tell by the beastly climate." "Oh," cried Jip as he sniffed up gulps of air. "But it has a smell, a good and glorious smell. I see water rat." And off he went. "Shh, listen," said Chi-Chi through teeth chattering from the cold. "There's Puddleby Church striking 4. Let's hope that Dab-Dab has a nice fire burning in the kitchen," I said. We said goodbye to the snail and headed across the marshes. "I'm sure she will," said the doctor. He picked out his old bag from among the bundles. "Come along, let's hug the riverbank so we don't miss our way in the fog." He sighed and looked around smiling. "You know, there's something rather attractive about the bad weather in England when you've a kitchen fire to look forward to. 4 o'clock, come along, we'll just be in time for tea." And that is the end of the voyages of Dr. Dolittle. Good listening, you guys. This took a long time, and it was an awesome read. I think it's a good book. I hope you enjoyed it. I love you all. Thank you for listening. Bye ya.